he wrapped every Christmas present just so, tied them all up in beautiful bows with great care, and he packed them into the car along with all his luggage, his skis, his ski boots, and all his gear. It all just fit. A call from the hospital meant that he would not be able to get on the road as quickly as he had hoped. There was an emergency and he was needed. He pulled into the hospital garage with his car filled to the brim with all those gifts that he had selected for his nieces and nephews, along with all his gear, everything necessary for a Christmas vacation. In the back of his mind, he thinks, it'll be fine, even though in truth the neighborhood was a little rough and the night was dark. But no time to wonder. He dashes in and gets to work. The detour to work that night took longer than he had thought. It always seems to do that. However, he was free at last. He was going home to see family at Christmas, and he left the hospital, and he was going to his car, and he was singing that Barbra Streisand version of Jingle Bells. You know the one? Jingle bell, jingle all the way. Anyways, he was all excited until he gets to the car, and his heart sank. Every window smashed in. Glass everywhere. The presents, the luggage, all gone. They stole everything, except the skis. He thought to himself, they left the skis, probably the most expensive thing in here, and they leave the skis. When my brother called me that night from the parking garage of Boston Children's Hospital, he was shaking in his voice. He had a quiver. He said, my car's been smashed in. They've stolen everything except for the damn skis. Can you believe it? They left the skis. Don't wait up for me. I'm going to be late. We all felt so dreadful for him that night. And when finally he arrived home in his rental car, he recounted the whole story. And he said, it's a bummer, but in the end, it really is just stuff. It's just a car. It's just things. TVs can be replaced, and insurance will generally cover the cost of a new windshield. But much, much harder for him was reconciling the loss of his presumed sense of safety and security in the world, because that too had been stolen from him that night. Not all of us will have had the experience of being robbed like my brother, but I dare say we all can recollect a time when our sense of safety and security was lost. You walked into work that day only to learn that your job has been outsourced or eliminated. A friend that you thought was a confidant betrays you, or perhaps you've now become compromised by a physical or emotional illness that you didn't have before. Sometimes it's an event occurring in the wider world that robs us of our sense of safety and belonging. Who amongst us did not feel heartsick upon learning of the events at Sandy Hook School? And what parent anywhere, everywhere, did not feel a pit in his or her stomach as they waved their children off to school that day, something that they had done 1,000 times before without a second thought? The good news at the heart of today's gospel is that our God has come to do battle with each and every force that seeks to rob us of abundant life. Mark wants to make clear that this is the heart of Jesus' mission. This is what Jesus has come to do. He has come to restore his people and set them free. Now, Jesus has moved from the wild banks of the Galilee, from the place of calling and invitation to the place of security and tradition. He has entered the synagogue, and he has been invited to teach. And those 4 bedraggled fishermen that we read about last week, the ones who were crazy enough to drop their nets and follow him, well, they're with him. And we suspect they haven't darkened the doors of a synagogue since their bar mitzvah. which frankly is fine with Jesus because you know why? They don't have any preconceived notions. They're open, and that's what he needs. And when he begins to preach and teach, they, like all the others gathered there, are inspired. He has them sitting on the edges of their seat, and they look to one another and they whisper, "He teaches with authority." On that front, everyone is in agreement. There is something about Jesus. Unlike the scribes who play it safe, Jesus has not come to impress, he has come to save. He is not just about words, but he has skin in the game. He teaches as though he would be willing even to lay down his life for his people. Now, we Episcopalians know very well that ritual and liturgy has a certain decorum and flow, right? And we can all agree on that, right? There's an order to things, and there are these unspoken rules that we follow in common worship. Like, for example, you don't stand up in the middle of the service and scream profanities at the top of your lungs. We don't do that. We are polite here, right? Although sometimes maybe we would like to do that. Yet that is exactly what happens in today's gospel. Right there in the middle of the service, a man is making a scene, interrupting the flow of the ritual. He is a man possessed with an unclean spirit. Now, we do not know exactly what binds the man we encounter in the synagogue at Capharnaum. We do not know of what he has been robbed. And many preachers over the course of time have suggested that unclean spirits equate to like epilepsy or mental illnesses, that the first church did not have the insights of modern-day medicine and psychology, but it would be irresponsible for us to make such a leap. We cannot make such a claim. We have no idea what is going on with this guy. He could have just lost his job, or perhaps just learned that his wife has a new serious diagnosis, or that his best mate has died. Whatever is happening, we know that he is reacting badly, he is hurting, and he is crying out for someone to see him, to reach out to him. And he turns to this guy named Jesus. Maybe he can help. Now, in my imagination, I sort of see Peter, Andrew, James, and John there thinking, well, he's called us to help, and in their sort of burly, strapping physique, standing up and looking at Jesus like, should we take care of this guy? Should we get him out of here? That is, after all, a natural response when someone's disturbing the flow of things. We would maybe consider doing that today. If somebody was doing that right here, right now, this morning, maybe the ushers might go up and tap that person on the shoulder, maybe say, you'll be much more comfortable doing that about 4 blocks that way. Or maybe take it up to the Saugatuck Congregational Church. Now, if we're being honest, we would think that way. We would do that. We would say this guy is a problem. But Jesus doesn't. Jesus doesn't. Jesus does not contain the hurting man who is crying out from help, crying out from his pain and his suffering. He does not closet his shame, the shame that binds him. Rather, with the authority everyone says he has, he embraces the interruption and draws the entire community in as well. The hurting guy who has been robbed of the gifts of abundant life is now the prayer. He's the prayer. Wasn't it John Lennon that said, life is what happens when you're making other plans? Sounds about right to me. There in the presence of everyone, Jesus goes to battle with the forces that are keeping this man from a life of peace and promise. He picks a fight with an unclean spirit, and that's how this ministry begins. And that is how it rolls on. That is what Mark tells us. That is who Jesus is. Jesus launches his public ministry in this gospel with an exorcism. Yes, I said it, exorcism. I said it again, didn't I? Now, most of us hear that word exorcism and we just bristle, and we think that is the stuff of movies, or that is only relevant in biblical times long past. And yet, if we could get beyond the sensationalism of that word and just get underneath what it truly means, it is God being completely and utterly and fully loving in the presence of the one whose life is coming unglued, unhinged. Right there, loving the family who is feeling wrapped around the axle by stress and strain. That is the God we meet this day. Jesus steps into the chaos of the other, into the fray of this pulled apart life. He is standing in that dark parking lot with the guy whose windows have been smashed in, with the woman who has hit rock bottom, or the family who is struggling with addiction. Jesus lives in this place. Jesus moves in this place. Jesus has his being in this place, and he has come to fight. He is lacing up his gloves. Yes, fight. I use that word, and I said it again. Because you know what? The forces that drag us down, that rob us of peace, that rob our homes of joy, that seek to polarize and dehumanize our communities are fierce, and they are tenacious, and they shout back at us, "Have you come to destroy us?" Yet the one who comes in love and teaches with authority is not afraid, is not weak, is not thin on commitment, but gets right in there, skin in the game, and loves us up and stays with us no matter what, and looks that unclean spirit in the eye and says, "Get out, move on." He does not say that to the person. That is the God whom we seek this day. We have not come with our lives as they are, with those forces that try to claim us and rob us of the promise of abundant life. We are not looking for a weak and thin and dispassionate God to meet us on that journey. No, we are looking to the demon-dashing, boundary-breaking Jesus who seeks only our good and who comes to cleanse our hearts and to set us free. Amen.